camera here. All right, we're going to get started. It is 1:01, so it is slightly tardy. Hello, everybody. You don't know the routine here, so we're going to start it again. The answer is hello, Marty. I really want to make sure that you are listening, paying attention to all the great things that we're going to talk about today.
Police action going on.
Yeah, a little something going on here. Anyway, so let's get started. Hello, everybody. There we go. Thank you. All right, this is future of film, from cinema and immersive entertainment to VR, AR, and theme parks. The franchise expands. And we've got a great group of people. I'll introduce them in just a moment, or actually they're going to introduce themselves. But I want to put this panel into a context so that you understand the topic description and how that's going to tie in with the discussion points and these folks' background. The film industry has changed significantly in recent years and is experiencing a resurgence on a global level across a wide range of platforms. From significantly improved digital sound systems to the introduction of laser projection systems, and on to the creation of more immersive cinema experiences in the form of increased penetration of IMAX and premium large formats of several varieties. There are more and more reasons to get out of the house and journey to the local theater. The introduction of virtual, augmented, and mixed reality into the mix has a lot of potential for both single user and group experiences, but there's a way to go before there is significant user base in this market segment. Our distinguished panel is uniquely qualified to provide deep insight into the many strategies and tactics to form the basis for content development and release decisions on a global level, and in turn, release schedules, screen technologies, virtual reality, and other related methodologies and technologies as we look to the future. That's a mouthful. All right, so we're going to get started with our panelists. I'm going to start with my immediate right in alphabetical order and ask each of them to take a moment to say who they are, where they work, and how that ties into the topic, and then we'll get into our discussion points. To my immediate right, Heather Blair.
Okay, I'm leaning in. Whoa, okay, really loud. My name is Heather Blair, and I'm head of cinema sales for Mediamation Inc. We are a interactive technology company located in Torrance and in China. We manufacture motion theaters. If you guys have been to a 4D movie where the seats move and you watch the action on the screen and everything happens inside the theater, that's what we do. We've evolved into a few other markets, why this panel works for us is that we program content for VR, so we have motion bases that will allow you to see a content and feel what's going on inside the room. And we also are entering into programming our seats to experience live gameplay for esports.
Thank you. And to her right, Todd Huddick.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. I started my career at the Walt Disney Company. It was an exciting time in the 90s. We were launching Disney's regional entertainment, so things like Disney Quest, ESPN Zone. Definitely a wonderful time of my life. I'm currently working for Barco. Barco is the global #1 projector manufacturer for theaters. So 2012, it was my responsibility to do a global worldwide exclusive with IMAX. I asked recently that I could give up my responsibilities at Barco running our global cinema division because I fell in love with immersive cinema. So Barco Escape was an idea that we had been working on for a while. And I am now the CEO for Barco Escape, and I have left a very responsible, good job to pursue a passion. So that's me.
Next, Gene Munster.
I've also left a very responsible and good job to start a venture firm this year, Loop Ventures, which is an early stage investor in VR and AR. As part of that, we continue to research all of these themes, so we publish 3 research pieces per week with a team of 5 analysts.
Okay, Ted Schulowitz.
I'm Ted. I have 2 very interesting jobs in the entertainment sphere. One of them that's very closely related to my good friend Todd here, and I know Gene very well and Heather very well, and looking forward to spending more time with you guys. I know you, of course. So I know everybody on the talk. My roles are, I'm the futurist at 20th Century Fox, and I'm also the chief creative officer for Barco Escape. So a few years back, when I left a movie camera company called Red, where I helped sort of get that moving and get that going into the world, my friends at Fox asked me to help them sort of figure out what the future of entertainment might be. So I've been doing that for the last few years. Simultaneously, my favorite movie projector when we were at Red was the Barco 4K projector, and Todd and I became very close friends. And at the same time, he was embarking on this immersive theme park style cinema experience called Barco Escape, which was very experimental at the time. So I talked to my friends at Fox and I talked to my friends at Barco and said, they both want me to be a part of these things, can we do them together? And for the last 4 years, I've been doing these two very interesting roles and dancing around the entertainment community and figuring out virtual reality, augmented reality, immersive cinema for all different types of experiences and having a good time doing it. So that's what I do.
Work is supposed to be fun.
I like to say if you can wake up and you can look at yourself and do you say, do I have to do this or do I get to do this for a living? And if you get to do something that you really like and find that you bring something interesting to the party and you say, I'm a guy that gets to do this, then you're in a pretty good position in life, I think.
Good. Kyle Villela, his right.
I'm curious, Ted, how many companies do you think have a person with the title of futurist?
Not many.
Not many, right? Okay.
Certainly not many in the entertainment world.
Right. Hi, everybody. I'm Kyle Villela. I'm the Vice President of Distribution at Fathom Events. Fathom Events is a distributor that specializes in event cinema. That's everything from the Metropolitan Opera to sports to gaming. We dabble in classic movies. We do some classic movies with usually some added value. That could be a Q&A, anything that is sort of an add-on to the film. I'm Vice President of Distribution, so basically everything on the content side comes to me and I get to decide who I'm going to make unhappy with this one. So my clients are usually like, AMC, Regal, Cinemark, all the other affiliates, and very happy to be here.
And to his right, and I won't say last but not least, because I still have a couple of words to say, it's Chris White.
I get to work at ODG, and it's great because every day I get out of bed, I'm helping create a new computing category, and it's just really fun. My job is business operations, so I do biz dev, sales, strategy, the regular buzzword stuff there. But at the end of the day, it's really a change management job. It's talking to groups like this to explain it's changing. The way that we're going to interact with technology is changing, and it's not only changing the way that you read it in the media, but it's changing on the display side and the way that you're going to interact with your eyes with the data. And that's what I get to do, is explain that and work through it. And it's definitely going to be the buzzword disruptive technology aspect, but it's also going to be the baby step of we're not going to be at Iron Man quite yet. And my job is to put the breadcrumbs so that we can get to this futuristic state, but how do we get there in bite-sized pieces?
Thank you, Chris. My name is Marty Schindler. I'm CEO of the Schindler Perspective. We are a husband and wife consulting team. Our backgrounds include a Big Four professional service firm, top 5 business school, supported by hands-on experience at companies such as Fox, MGM, Lucasfilms Industrial Light and Magic, Kodak Cinesight, and Bank of America. Through the years, we've worked at almost every point on the horizontal value chain, from previs to all forms of distribution, and many companies on the vertical. And then from a futurist point of view, not to take away anything from Ted, one of the people who absolutely inspired me many years back, because we wrote a business plan for him and worked with him, was Alvin Toffler. I've mentioned that to you before. And rarely do any of us get to meet someone who just kind of, especially as an adult, that creates a longer lasting impression. And I'd read his books in graduate school, Future Shock and War and Anti-War, and actually The Third Wave, and Steve Case's Third Wave is written off of that book. Anyway, we rarely get a chance to really say someone absolutely inspired us and helped, create our frame of reference, which is why this panel is called Future of Film, and my earlier panel today was Future of TV. So with that, we're going to get into the rest of our panel. Let me ask you a couple questions. How many people here, by a show of hands, have seen a movie in Escape? Okay, a few. How about in IMAX? Not everybody, that's interesting. Okay, rode on a motion base, either in a theater, okay? How about at a theme park? Very good. Attended a special event such as an alternative cinema at a theater that was not a current feature film. We saw King and I a couple months ago. Or the Met Opera. How about the Met Opera at the cinema? There we go. Or my wife and I went to see The Grateful Dead on 420. It was a good, you saw it, were you there that day?
I have an interesting story about Sundance and the Grateful Dead and living with the Grateful Dead in a 200-seat little dive bar, which was unbelievable.
All right, close enough. And how many people really have experienced VR and or AR personally, have worn a headset? Okay, how many people own one other than cardboard who don't work directly in the industry?
That's
Okay.
a problem, by the way. We've talked about this before.
Yes, we have.
So we can talk about that in a
Let
minute.
me ask this question. For those of you whose hands went up for VR, which is almost everybody, who has, since they tried it out, gone back more than once? Okay.
All right, let's move on. So we've got a range of people who really cover the topic immersive cinema. It's a time of transformation, in my opinion, and a phrase I use all the time is tracking the numbers. I use it when I tweet sometimes. I use it in industry stats. The global box office was effectively at break even in 2016 compared to 2015, in large part due to the slowdown in growth in China. In fact, Reuters announced today that Moody's downgraded China's debt today, if you saw that. So people get a lot of great home entertainment experiences. So here on this stage, we have people that represent various forms of possible transformative entertainment. And my question really is, why are we at the right time, or maybe why are we not at the right time for this transformation to occur? Gene?
I think we're at the right time, and my background is on the technology side, covering and writing research on the larger internet companies like Google, Facebook, and Apple. And those companies, and you put Microsoft in there and Snapchat, are all focused on building at least the VR and the AR piece of this. And collectively, they're going to spend about $35 billion in total R&D. Now, the portion that's allocated to AR and VR is maybe 10% of that. But the reason why this is not just talk is that you have people who are very motivated, Mark Zuckerberg and Tim Cook, to see this future through.
So I think maybe what I would say is I wouldn't even put a right, wrong time perspective on it. I think if you reflect backwards, you can look at the first moments when people started to look at their entertainment spheres, which were typically live entertainment with actual humans, and started to apply some sort of technology layer to that. The beginnings of cinema, the beginnings of radio, the beginnings of the Nickelodeon, where, putting your head in something is not a new thing. It actually was at the beginnings of the art form, moving from the live theater experience into something that you could use technology for, and it's carried through for literally over 100 years now. So I think as you sort of look at every stage of the equation, there's always what's coming around the next corner, what people are experimenting with. And I think potentially the most disruptive part of this, positive disruptive part of this, is we're getting to a point now where we're starting to scratch the surface on it will actually make sense to wear your entertainment. Whereas up until now, we sort of fake it. We try and wear our entertainment. So we put it up on things, we hang it on walls, we take it into environments, and we hold these phones up to our faces all day. What ODG is doing, and I'm very close with these guys, Fox is an investor in ODG, and we believe in that future. What ODG is doing, what Magic Leap is doing, what Microsoft is doing, and soon to be what Apple is doing, is moving in a direction where that next wave of entertainment will start to look and become mainstream use case. So from a theatrical standpoint, from the other side of let's gather in a physical space to do this, what do companies need to do to react positively to that? And that's what Todd and I are working on the other side of it.
Yeah, and just some of the flip side, right? It's a different conversation when we talk about VR and AR or we talk about cinema. There's some fundamentals of cinema that I absolutely believe. I believe that cinema is a community experience. I don't want glasses and head-mounted displays and those kinds of things in that community experience. That doesn't mean that we're against VR or don't believe in VR and AR. We absolutely believe in them very much. But for in the auditorium, that cinema experience, it's not about technology for the sake of technology. It's about the story. It's always been about the story. And when the technology enhances the story and you forget that that technology is there, then you've done something special. You begin to create moments that people can't get anywhere else. And the home's getting better, and VR experiences are absolutely getting better. And so the cinema needs to continue stepping it up. And Marty, as you refer to the numbers, while attendance is declining, the revenues are not declining. What we see very much is that people are willing to pay for a premium experience. The key is, can you deliver an experience that is so compelling that people are going to put down the iPad, get off their couch, and go to experience something special in the cinema? So that's very much the focus for cinema, as different from, I think, some of what we're talking about with VR and AR, which we're also very excited about. But for that cinema experience, very much about the community experience, very much about the story for us in what we develop.
You know what we like to say, Todd, is we don't call them movie theaters at Fathom. We call them cultureplexes.
Event spaces, right? You're building
An entertainment
events.
center. Yeah,
Right.
look at the business model, right? You if you're Cinemark or any other movie theater owner, you've paid for the seats, you've paid the mortgage on the building, you've done all that, but you're only using your facility from, say, 5 o'clock at night until 2 in the morning. All of that other time is available, and we're actually very, very excited to contribute that. And I think one of the teams that's really leading, what do you do and how do you take advantage of that? Is it opera? Is it concerts? Is it esports? Is it business meetings? You don't need to look any further than Fathom to begin to understand how we're learning about that.
And I want to add something
Go
as
ahead,
well.
please.
This year at CinemaCon, which you guys probably know that trade show, Coca-Cola asked us to take our motion bench, and we have a lobby system that has a 2-seat bench. They said, we want to put a compelling, just a cool little thing for people to come by that come by our booth at CinemaCon. Coca-Cola is the most iconic brand, specifically in film. They're the biggest supporter because that's their product that's sold to consumers. So everybody that comes to CinemaCon and comes to their booth knows Coke, but they wanted to reach just a little bit deeper. So they asked us to make like a little story for them that just kind of tells this uplifting little experience. I sat outside and watched as the thrones of studio executives who are, been there, done that, were so excited. I heard them ooh and ah and just get like, that was such a great experience because it was in VR and it had motion and it was a story. So kind of like what these guys are saying, it really does matter that the content was really neat and really compelling, and all it did was make you feel good about Coke, and then we ended it with a little Coke smell, so they walked away with that, and it was like, okay, this is what it's going to take to make the consumer want to experience that inside a cinema. Sorry.
I have a short
Chris?
memory. Can you ask the question again? Wasn't it, why is now the time? Is that
Well,
how-
that's how it all started out, but we had some very good discussion points back and forth. So why would you say now is the time for transformation?
So I think of it kind of as stars aligning. And so what a majority of my day is spent is actually spent explaining smart glasses to the enterprise. So telepresence or how to do assisted reality in a manufacturing standpoint. What does that have to do with entertainment panel that we're on? We're seeing in smart glasses a very similar trend with human beings that took place with the BlackBerry. They first learned about it in the enterprise, and then they said, well, wait a second, why can't I have my AOL on this? Or why can't I have my iPod and email in the same thing? And the answer to your question that I would posit is the reason why now is a step further is because the return on investment in the enterprise space, and I'm a finance major, and I live this, and I can't believe it. Rolling out of bed, they're getting 25% return on whatever their pilot programs are, which is obviously making everybody very happy. As that more and more pilots go out and more different industries, they're going to get comfortable with the technology. They're going to know how to talk about the technology. We don't know how to speak about it right now. It hurts my head, and I said this last year, and I'm going to probably keep saying it every time you have me on a panel. When someone comes up to me and say, "Are you AR or VR glasses?" That's like saying, "Hey, is that laptop a PowerPoint or Excel laptop?" We don't know how to speak about the technology yet. And as it gets into the enterprise and the humans start to work with it and see how it is there during the day, then at night when they want to go entertain, they're going to have that same philosophy, same question of, well, why can't I watch my big screen TV here as I'm commuting on the train or in the car, or you pick. That's why I think the time is coming.
Okay. So, there's the AR, VR industry, broadly speaking, motion bases, immersive entertainment in terms of escape has fairly low numbers at this point in terms of penetration. Even the number of events that Fathom has, relatively low. But what are some of the metrics that's going to help that increase? Because Todd's point is really well taken in terms of you've got this underutilized asset, the movie theater, that there's nobody there Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Thursday maybe at night. Friday is jam. Saturday is jam, and through early evening on Sunday. So what are some of the metrics that's going to increase the capacity for all of you?
Follow the money, right? When people know that they can make money, what we must do as Barco, when we took 60% market share in the projector business, was easy. We needed to improve the audience experience, and we needed to drive bottom line profitability for our customers, the exhibitors. When we released Star Trek in Escape, what we saw that we were able to generate 62% more box office revenue per auditorium than all the other formats combined. The time is now because the technology has gotten here, right? Cinerama was here well before Barco Escape ever arrived. But now we've got the technology and we've got the opportunity to create these compelling experiences. I think when we leverage that technology and remember where we came from, for me it's the Walt Disney Company, and you would hear these stories. What must it have been like to go to the cinema and see The Wizard of Oz? Everything's in black and white, and then all of a sudden Dorothy lands and it's in color. That wasn't the first time a movie had been done in color. It wasn't the first opportunity. But the technology has advanced enough. I think that if we hold true to what's important about cinema, about VR, the technology that's enabling to do these things, when it improves the audience experience and is able to drive bottom line profitability, that's when this explodes for many of us. Fathom, Barco, many of us.
I think probably what I would add is, because I tend to study human nature a lot. I tend to study humanity and why humanity makes the choices they do to do the things they do. And what we've seen in increasingly shallower pits and faster moments of inertia is people are more and more comfortable with things that are new. They're willing to be experimental. They're willing to try things faster than a half a generation ago and a full generation ago, which is what you study every day, is how quickly is someone willing to adapt to something new? What we've seen on the Barco Escape side is that they're super intrigued with something that's different than the cinema experience that they've always seen. So that proved early success and continues to prove success. What we see in virtual reality and now augmented reality is people are hyper intrigued with what's around the next corner. And will they discover something that will be compelling to them, and then will they make a change in their behavioral patterns to actually start using that technology? So we see it in physical spaces as theatrical experiences are evolving and changing quickly, and people want them, and adding things like motion seats, which we know are successful. We see that it works in a multiplex environment and not just in a theme park. We see that Escape works in a multiplex environment and not just a theme park. And we're seeing, per your point when you asked who's done VR in some fashion, you've all done it, who went back and did it again and continues to try and seek it out and figure it out. You're all intrigued by it. So as the technology continues to improve and finds its homes, I think it'll come faster than people realize. Now, that being said, when you start to look at the future, and you start to actually look at the real monetization pools and the real success pools of things that relate to new technology, it actually always takes longer than people think. So what I tend to do in the studio role that I have is I'm always working with the executives on putting as long a lens as possible on their threshold of comfort. And I'm constantly using a 10-year window, which is a little frightening to people from a business standpoint, is that you have to really look 10 years in the future before I'm actually going to make a business out of this. And I say, yes, the beginnings of this will find little subsets of businesses, but it's actually going to take a good amount of time to transfer fully from one step to the next step to the next step. And all you have to do is look at the last time you used a typewriter, the last time you watched a CRT tube television. There will be a period of time, there's 15 or so laptops floating open here, where you will not remember the last time you used a laptop. You will not remember the last time you typed on a physical keyboard and looked at a physical screen.
But
That's going to take a while.
But take a moment and look at the counterpoint, right? Ted's talking about those dips. Every one of us up here on the panel are dealing with those adoption curves, right? If you go to social media and you look up Todd Haddock, you will still find the posts of people who say, who the hell are you to take what we have always known as cinema and this rectangle and think that you can change it into this immersive thing? We're talking about innovation in VR and AR. It was more than 100 years that we were using film and cinema. And so this is a great environment, and we're all excited about it, and we're all early adopters. But I think most of you are familiar with crossing the chasm. For many of us, that's where things get difficult and stuck. And that's why I always go back to what's really driving the industry, right? For us in cinema, it's the community experience, it's the story. Yes, the technology is enabling, but that technology needs to fade into the background and not be the story itself. Crossing that chasm's hard. There are a lot of people that wonder who the hell I am to think that we're going to change that single bed sheet that's been there for 100 years and do something new.
And I want to input too. I think all of us, because we're vendors supplying the technology, are looking forward to the day that the studios actually promote that they're creating the content in our formats, so that the consumer is a little more aware, because it is a little bit daunting if you walk up to your kiosk and you see Star Wars in 2D and 3D and IMAX and Dolby, and there's like this, what is this? What are these formats? I don't know. I'll take the cheap one, or I'll take the 7 o'clock. So if there's some more education that goes out from the studio saying, we've made this title and these different dynamic ways to view it, I think consumers are going to be curious to come out and see it.
You know, to put Ted's 10-year window into a perspective, it was circa 1977 or thereabouts when a company called Magnetic Video in Farmington Hills, Michigan, started putting out beta tapes, and that later became Fox Video. I was working at Fox at that time, and it was not until 1997 that the first DVD, standard definition DVD, came out. And frankly, I really don't remember when the first Blu-ray came out, but each of them took time for the installed base of technology, the installed base for people to get rid of their VHS and beta machines to get that DVD player, and for a DVD player to be built into your laptop.
Well, and now we are, as a society, very comfortable with the idea of what we call virtual goods, right? There was a period of time in all our lifetimes that things that had physical presence felt like they were more valuable than things that didn't have physical presence. And now when you talk to a generation younger than us, it's actually the opposite. They don't want those physical attachments. They want to be light and nimble, and they want to have a virtual locker and a virtual everything in their world, which is why when you look at the Facebooks of the world, the Apples of the world, the Microsofts of the world, the big players that are looking to virtualize everything, that's where this all starts to come into play. It's way bigger than just entertainment. It's about, changing the entire fabric of society. So when you listen to a guy like Mark Zuckerberg talk about why he's so interested in virtual reality and augmented reality, and even he's saying that the virtual reality we have today is just a stepping stone, and they've got billions of dollars invested in that stepping stone, and he's already calling for the death call of that, right? He's already moved on in his mind and his company's mind as to what really the end game is when you get to wear it in something completely light and nimble and sensible, and your digital goods and your digital currency are coming at you in a different way, but they have tremendous value. And that's the kind of stuff I get to dance in all day long.
Continuing to put time in perspective, it was 10 years ago this past week, or the week before, where Facebook had its IPO, just to put a time frame on it. Let's talk about content production for a moment. it's not unusual in a motion base and in something like Escape, or when 3D first came out, to just kind of convert it after the fact, do it in post. Not that it's not done today and in 3D a lot, but today, differently in 3D, it's thought about in advance. It's thought about during previs, it's thought about during development. And I know you guys are thinking about that, both of you, meaning Escape and motion-based companies, and you're not the only one in the business, even though you've got a great market share. So what difference will it make as creatives, as directors and producers start thinking today about what that movie is going to be like, that has a 2-year or 2.5-year time frame before its release date, when they start really thinking about it in advance? What difference will that make?
Yeah.
So I'll jump in on this one because it's something that has been driving me since I first thought about 4D being perfect for a cinema. I've told this story a million times. When you listen to and watch the movie Jaws, the setup to the scene that makes your hair stand on end is the sound, that dun, 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 dun. And you know that shortly something really scary is going to happen. And I've talked to a few pretty big filmmakers, so I can't say who or what, but soon one of the tentpole titles will be made, in the format in 4D, because then the creative department can utilize, I call it like all the little tools in your toolbox. They can make the seats move, they can make the ticklers on the legs, they can poke at a certain time, they can set up a scene that's going to be scary and have the theater completely still, and then decide when they want to scare the shit out of you. So I want
To put it bluntly.
What?
To put it bluntly.
To put it bluntly. But they can decide when and how the tools in the room are used instead of it being done post, and just probably like their format as well. There's so much excitement that can be done in creative when it's known in advance. So we're doing the best we can now, and we're looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's exactly right. It's well said. Look, it is a different experience. When we're in conversations with the major directors, and it's all the people that you can think of that we don't want to talk about because we don't want to ruin the deals that are in place and coming out now. But when you sit with them, what we're providing for them is a new canvas and the paintbrushes. What they do with that, right? We've got the best Belgian engineers in the world. We're not the best storytellers in the world. Our job is not to change the way Michael Bay or J.J. Abrams or Steven Spielberg or Scotty Waugh want to do something. I was in a conversation with the folks at Pixar, and what they said to me is, look, every time I'm underwater and Finding Nemo, I want to be in this world, and when I come back on land, take me back to the bedsheet that's been there for 100 years. That's part of my storytelling. When we worked with J.J. Abrams and Justin Lin for Star Trek, they said, look, the Enterprise should feel a little claustrophobic, a little bit like you're on a submarine. But boy, when we've got those shots out in space, that's when we want to open it up. Each storyteller is going to do things differently and in their way. When you become a part of the workflow, when they're anticipating that in the beginning, of course, it's significantly better than converting something after the fact.
I think today, Skycam experiences are ready to port over right now, and we have folks slowly kicking that around. And why do I bring that up? Based upon some of the description that you guys just had, is as the directors start to wrestle with the goggled out VR experience, there's going to be these things such as the Skycam experience of watching the football game, and you're going to say, I don't want to watch it the regular way. I want to see it from that perspective. And that's going to be happening in parallel, which then is going to feedback and influence those directors, and then they're going to want to counter back. And then the other part to think about is mobile VR. So we're tethered VR right now, and that's what we're talking about. But in the same parallel world, you're going to take that content that we're talking about and being able to have it on a device where you aren't locked to your desk or a big workstation. And then, in this stream that I'm talking about, then you're going to have Jordan Spieth standing on your coffee table as he's teeing off on the 6th hole at the Masters, and you're going to be right there looking at him, walking around, seeing where that golf ball goes and traveling with it if you so want. And all of those dots that I describe, or stars aligning, are going to influence the directors of the way that you guys just talked about the content coming up. And so it's going to be this neat feedback loop, and it'll be very helpful for the entertainment industry as more and more screens get out there. There's not enough screens out there to make the investment worth it yet. That's going to start to change.
Well, that was
here.
the metrics I was referring to earlier to get more out
Yep.
there. It's a chicken and egg concept because for what, I won't ask you the specifics, but to get Star Trek or The Maze Runner, it was the first movie, which was, I didn't see it in Escape. I saw Star Trek in Escape. Maze Runner worked great as a basic
Yeah.
2D movie. It was a great story. But it's a chicken and egg before you got to get all these producers. The exhibitors want to know how many movies are in your pipeline, and the producers want to know how many theaters you're going to have out there to make it worth it.
That's exactly right. So there are early adopters, right? So Wes Ball did The Maze Runner. And The Maze Runner was a movie all about these kids surviving in a maze. And so it made all the sense in the world that they wanted to project all around the audience and put you in the maze. There are early adopters like J.J. Abrams and Justin Lin that want to do this. But at the end of the day, and I almost hesitate to say it, but it is what we struggle with, it's going to be about box office. They're not going to invest in understanding your technology or my technology or anybody else's technology until it's driving box office revenue for them. So we work with those early adopters, and what we're talking about again is crossing that chasm. When does it become mainstream? It becomes mainstream when it's supported by the studios. It becomes mainstream when you've all raised your hands and you're asking for it at the box office. And it becomes mainstream when we understand how to leverage that Skycam for our storytelling, because it is a piece of the storytelling. Just with Escape, to give you one example, how do I want to direct the audience's attention? So my chief creative officer down here, Ted Shilowitz, did some early content stuff for us with the screens. And we were able to get a conversation going from the left and the right, and mom and dad are in an argument. You can see the kids through in the living room and how it's affecting them. Problem is, we were putting the audience in a tennis match. Where do I want to draw the audience's attention as a storyteller? Where do I want to keep them? And when do I actually want somebody in a horror movie sneaking up behind you just so that you can notice it to this conversation? It takes time to learn that new language, whether that language is VR, AR, or Skycams, or Escape, or moving seats.
And probably what I would add just quickly to that is we often are talking about this chicken and egg scenario with anything new, with anything that has an emerging footprint, an emerging potential marketplace, an emerging commercial success point somewhere out there in the future. And really all we do is just say, just stick with it, just keep at it. It's a process, right? And not everything is going to be a home run when there's not even a baseball field to play on yet, that we're just building the baseball field. But it's those that stay with things and have enough conviction to know that things are going to change along the way, but you just keep at it, and eventually you solve the problem, and eventually you see the success on the other side of it. So that's just about being positive about something when all the reality forces around you, and this is both in the theatrical world, the VR and AR world, are telling you it's not coming fast enough, people aren't buying these things quick enough, they're not adopting fast enough. And all I say is, it's okay, we're just going to stick with it, to your point of the BlackBerry and everything else.
So
things evolve.
You say stick with it. You know, right now there's a lot of hype on both sides of it, positive and some not so positive. Variety the other day, and I always talk about the Gartner hype cycle because it really pertains to so many things that we work on. Are people familiar with the Gartner hype cycle? Okay, Gartner is a international consulting firm, and very quickly what they say is it starts with a technology trigger, figure your X and Y axis, starts with a technology trigger at the origin, and it goes up really fast. It's called a peak of inflated expectations. And then it drops after a period of time to the trough of disillusionment. And then finally, things pick up, okay? And there's some carnage along the way.
And that's that 10-year reference point that I always make. Now, whether that's 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, or 10 years, the longer period of comfort you can accept within your business organization or yourself of what change means, the more success you're going to have.
So
Just
on the hype
what it
side
means.
of that, Variety put out an article just this past week saying fewer than 10 million monthly US VR headset users this year, 17 million by 2019. Separately, Best Buy closed half of its Oculus demo stations earlier this year. Oculus also had a management shakeup, which is not unusual in a technology startup as formal management comes in. And some people do wonder what's going on with Magic Leap.
You should add into that world, because you're living that world. Gene's living that world all day long, so you should add into
The
that.
Oculus side?
Just the
Yeah,
whole
I would
state, the whole
just,
space.
on the, like, I would add on top of that, that Facebook, they have their Story Studio, which, Oculus Story Studio,
Yeah.
and they closed that down recently too. And so I think we have not, I totally agree with those cycles and the boom and bust and or the Gartner hype cycle. We haven't hit that oh no point yet with VR and AR.
Well, so given what Ted said, Gene, about stick with it, what are the challenges that you see? You're not in it day to day. I mean, you are in it day to day, but you're not, you're an analyst, which means you have, in theory, an independent and perspective. So what are the challenges that you see that AR and VR need to get over in order to gain that traction?
So the typical response is it's a chicken and egg question between content or applications or use cases for AR and VR versus the hardware side. Our perspective is that this is a hardware problem because we still have major limitations around battery life in terms of what type of glasses, even the way that we're viewing these worlds. Is it going to be a screen like Google Glass was, or is it going to be some sort of a hologram that's projected back on your eye, a light field example? So our belief is that once the headset piece is figured out and the wearable piece is figured out and the prices get to a point where they're kind of $1,000-ish, and our best guess is that Apple's going to come out with some sort of a headset probably in 2019 or 2020. Some people think it's next year. I think that that's a low probability that that happens. But when you start to see companies that can do at scale, then I think that all this will follow. The easy analogy is the iPhone. It's 10 years old. iPhone came out. It really changed the hardware piece. A year after the iPhone came out, the App Store came out, which fundamentally changed how we think about a phone. It became a computer in your pocket. So we're using that analogy to think about how this next wave is going to play.
How about from an infrastructure point of view? I mean, when the iPhone came out, it put a real burden on, first it was AT&T, first one to release it, put a real burden on their infrastructure to get cell signals out there. The industry underestimated what that was going to bring, how rapid the purchases would be. So what about infrastructure from an AR, VR point of view?
Glad you mentioned it. This gets to the whole 5G theme. 5G is the speeds are going to be dramatically faster. We don't know exactly what that means as far as dramatically faster than 4G. But to power these experiences, to be able to look at our environment around and have real-time overlays coming, you need a lot faster internet. So every 10 years, we typically see a shift in the speeds, and that kind of puts us around 2020. So when you kind of put all this together, it gets back to a general theme here, which is this is going to take longer than we think, but be bigger than what we think.
I agree.
Let me jump in.
Different from the way it is today.
Yes.
Fundamentally different.
Chris?
From a hardware perspective, from ODG's standpoint, let me throw us something out there as the way to kind of look at it. We think about it. So everyone right now thinks about the smartphone just because the smartphone's taking a lot of the oxygen out of the room, and those are the comps that everyone knows. But if you think about the price point to what Gene was just talking about a little bit of, how much did you pay for that first high-res plasma TV you bought? Was it like $5,000 or $8,000?
My 720p 2005 was about $3,200.
So imagine if I could give you a viewing experience better than that, a bigger screen than that, and you could take it anywhere and it was less than 6 ounces. Don't you think that should have a price premium to that than what you just said? Or is it the social factor that television brings in? So the comp of the smartphone is what I'm suggesting might not be the right comp on the price point for adoption because of all the new utilities that replacing all the monitors in your life will do. And I'm doing that right now. I'm going through hospitals and all the surgeons are coming to me saying, Chris, can you just give me Atari? And I say, what does Atari mean? and they said, well, you always come in here talking about you could put the cadaver up and we can walk around it. That's great. I just want to be able to have the screen that I have to turn my head and look right here. Give me that. How can we do that? And that aspect, they'll write big checks for. And so the Atari example I like to use a lot. I think the other thing to put another point of weaving in, we just got it last week, had a great call with a large retailer. You guys have all probably been in their shop in the last 3 months or so. Every 6 seconds, somewhere around the globe, a consumer goes into their stores to look at products. And what the guy says is, he says, the thing that's nice is we're a private company, so we don't have to be meeting the quarterly numbers. But we're thinking of a day when none of our stores are going to exist. And how do we do retail when no one goes into those stores? And I give that example with when you asked about the movie theater, because I was just in Italy and we went to Pompeii, and there was people there with the Gear VR trying to imagine what it looked like, before the volcano went off. And I sat there and I wish I had my hardware sooner. Let me show you something so much better. But then on the train ride back, and it's a long train ride back into the city, it would have been awesome to watch movies on the train about Pompeii after I just walked it. So I could have had AR or VR experience at the site, and then I could have consumed content that people in this room made while in that transit coming back, and that revenue model is a different revenue model than going to a movie theater on a Friday or Saturday night.
So lots of these content starts with image acquisition, okay, basic thing. And while I expect Ted to chime in on this, others hopefully will too. You got computer graphics is still very important. It's a basic part of almost every movie in some way, shape, or form. But from a camera technology point of view, when you've got everything from the Red to the Alexa, the Ozo, Ricoh Theta, what does that form of image look like, whether it is for a theater? What kind of camera technology are we looking at as we look 2, 3, 10 years down the road? Because anything 10 years down the road is in some form of development today.
Absolutely.
So what kind of 360
Yeah.
is it? What is it
It's
looking like?
This is a big topic. Like, we could do a 2 hours just on this. So I'll try and truncate it as
Well, we
best
got
I can.
5 minutes.
Got 2 minutes, right, to cover this topic. The most interesting thing about camera technology as it relates to all of these fields, whether we're doing immersive cinema, where the cinema is all around you, with Escape is 3 screens, right, not 1. Virtual reality, augmented reality, what we call 6 degree of freedom virtual reality, where you're actually moving around a space versus just look around a space, which is 1 degree of freedom, spinning around it. The tools need to evolve and change. We're lucky on the Escape side that the high-resolution cameras by Red and Aeroflex and everybody else, Sony and the other companies, build high enough resolution tools that the same cameras we use to shoot normal, quote-unquote, run-of-the-mill movies, we can use to shoot Escape movies. So that is actually well in hand. We actually have the technology that does that.
Again, and just a piece on that to tie to your earlier comments, Marty, this is about the timing, right? This is why it's a little bit easier now. Because of the work that Red and Ari and others had done 10 years ago, Scotty Waugh, who's the director of Need for Speed, Active Valor, he's doing a movie 100% in Escape. He was able to use the technology that's available today. So that's part of your timing.
Okay.
The more difficult, more forward-thinking challenge is when that world is literally all around you and you can move around in it. How do you deal with that? So I've often, I give a lot of these talks and stuff, and I often say, for the worlds of virtual reality, when it really starts to get to 6DoF virtual reality, we're still kind of using black and white cameras to achieve color. That we haven't really built the tools yet to fully achieve the objective of being able to move around inside virtual worlds, to actually create spatial entertainment. Where we have completely done this successfully in the CGI world with game engines and computer graphics. It's fully spatial, we can actually move around in CGI. There's a number of companies that I'm involved in, either on the boards of or an investor of, or just related to in a number of different ways, that are doing what we call volumetric capture. So it allows you to take an array of cameras. These things are very exotic. They're very expensive right now, but eventually they will be very mainstream. And you're actually capturing spatial data. So you're triangulating every single pixel inside a video sphere so that you don't just get to look around in it, you can actually move around in it like you do in CGI. It's a long-term objective. So I'll throw out some names of companies that if you're interested in this, you would want to track. You want to track a company named Lytro. You want to track a company named 8i. You want to track a company like named HypeVR. That's the one I'm a big investor in. You want to track a company called Uncorporeal. So, and there's probably 3 or 4 others that I could give you that are touch points. The good news is you've got 5 or 6 companies exerting effort to figure this problem out because we know it's a problem. The other major news that has just come out is Facebook has their annual conference every year called F8. And they just announced that they believe that this video sphere where you can only look around but can't move around is not enough. So they've announced an initiative around volumetric capture as well, which on the surface, for those other 5 or 6 companies that I mentioned, initially, for a moment in time, they have the worst day of their life, right? Because they're little startups, raising capital, trying to create something brand new. And then here comes the juggernaut of Facebook saying, we are totally going to do this, and we're going to take over that piece of the industry. And what I've told all of them is, that's only a bad moment for a moment, because when a big company like Facebook, which was no company 10 years ago, to your point, validates the fact that we need to move this ball forward from a video standpoint, everybody wins. And those small companies that are likely much more innovative than what the bigger juggernauts are doing are either going to get absorbed by those juggernauts, either Facebook or Google or Apple. They'll become acquisition targets, or they'll make something so remarkable that it will change the industry and they'll become a juggernaut. So we kind of track what happens when very large, important, high cap companies make a statement out to the world that they believe in the change that the little startups are doing. Those little startups actually become much more valuable. So that's the kind of stuff I get to track all day long.
To that point, in our Future of TV panel this morning, I mentioned an article that I posted last week as the Smart Article of the Week on CNBC by the CEO of GMM Nonstick Coatings. They make coatings for pots and pans. I don't know if you saw the article or not.
No, listen.
And one of the comments that we talked about this morning, we won't talk about now, was if you really want to innovate, you got to innovate like Bezos. That was one of his 5 points. One of his other quotes in that article, let me just read it, then we're going to move on because we've got about 8 or 9 minutes left. Is Amazon making business harder? Of course. Am I complaining? Not a chance. Business is supposed to be difficult, and competitors who can't evolve will be selected for extinction by a beautiful force called capitalism. End of quote. All right, so here's what we're going to do. There are 6 or 8 other things that I had planned that we could talk about, but we've close to run out of time. I want to do something I think really is fun and it works well for the folks up here. I call it Blockbuster or Not. And I'm going to read off a handful of movies, and you got to say whether A, you want to see it by a show of hands, or you think it will be a blockbuster if you're not going to see it. And I'm going to run through these very quickly, so these guys got to pay attention, and you guys got to pay attention. Everybody ready? First one, Baywatch.
Saw it.
Pirates of the Caribbean. Okay. Captain Underpants.
So we're voting if they're going to be a blockbuster? Is that what we're...
Well, it's how, if you think it's going to be a blockbuster. Wonder Woman. Okay. The Mummy with Tom Cruise. World War Z. This is World War Z 2. You probably worked on it, right? Okay. All right. Cars 3. Okay. The Recall. Anybody know what The Recall is?
Todd and I would put our heads way up.
The Recall is a new movie releasing June 2nd with Wesley Snipes in the Escape format. So thank you for throwing that up.
I purposely put it on the list.
You're a
Thank you.
good man.
Transformers.
You're a good man, buddy. Yeah. it's gonna be
Anybody
good.
tired of Transformers? I am. Despicable 3 still seems to work.
Yeah.
Ghost Story. Okay, not many. Spider-Man. War of the Planet of the Apes. Trailer looks great. Dunkirk. Boy, not a lot of recognition on that one. Inconvenient sequel, Truth to Power, Al Gore's movie. Okay. Terminator 2 in 3D. By the way, that's my only film credit in the world, so you gotta go see it. I don't get any residuals or anything. Blade Runner. Yeah, good show of hands there. Six Below.
It's going to be fantastic.
It's another one of ours.
Okay. The Humanity Bureau.
Also ours.
That'll be good.
Yeah.
Okay, and last one on the list, Ready Player One.
It's good.
Everybody know what Ready Player One is? Basically, it's a Steven Spielberg movie about VR. I'm going to leave it at that. Let's take a couple of minutes for Q&A. Q from you, A from them. Who's got a question? Chris, go ahead.
Just from each one of you, where do you think VR is on the Gartner Hype Cycle? Where on the curve?
Where's VR in the hype cycle?
And AR.
And AR.
I think, well, separately, not.
AR hasn't even gotten into the front end yet. It's just starting. I mean, I'll give you my opinion. I actually think that we are exactly where I expected us to be in terms of consumer adoption, in terms of the amount of material that's being created, and in terms of the general overall enthusiasm about the industry of virtual reality. I think that a lot of the investment companies and companies that were making these very, very vast predictions of how large and how quick it would grow were overstating it for all the wrong reasons, likely to get people to invest in their funds. And I think that it is small but powerful, and there is already an underground audience that is using these devices, mostly gamers, and that's widening out right on the target that I believe is within this 10-year curve.
So where on the curve?
12 months from the trough.
12 months from the trough. Okay, that's-
I agree with Ted.
Before it hits the trough?
That's right.
Okay.
Well, I think we're kind of already, in my opinion, I think we're already beginning, quote unquote, the trough. But I actually don't think the trough is as real as people think, because there's actually an underground layer that supports this. It's almost like, I'll tell you an interesting side story. A long, long time ago, when Apple was almost going out of business, I invested a good amount of money in Apple at like $11 a share, simply because I was working in the movie industry and I needed to make sure my Avids stayed alive. They were running on Macs, right? And it was important to me, and there was an underground culture that essentially kept that company alive because they loved it, because it was important to them. Virtual reality right now is going to stay alive and then thrive, so the deep, deep dip is probably not going to be as deep as people think, because there's already an underground audience that is viral that really wants this to succeed and will continue to make it succeed.
Please advise us on where to invest, because I missed
Yeah,
that
I
bubble.
did well with the Apple thing, that was true.
I'm following you.
But it was not because I was a good investor, it was simply because it was important to me personally that it stayed alive. And there's a lot of people right now that it's important that virtual reality and augmented reality continue its future, that it doesn't go away for another generation.
I think it's important you separate the two. I think that AR is being underestimated, and I think it's going to reach practical application faster and easier. I think it's a lower hurdle for some of the AR applications, and I like the estimate on the 12 months from the downside on VR.
Actually, I wanted to throw another question at Kyle, actually, if I could, and we'll go over a few minutes. Don't tell anybody. You know, it impressed me that a few weeks ago, actually middle of March, La Traviata, one of the Metropolitan Opera, was number 9 at the weekend box office. I saw that and I said, wow.
We've done better, by the way.
Pardon me?
We've done better, too.
Okay, well,
Others.
I just happened to notice it.
Yeah.
I was thinking ahead to this panel. But that's still, number 9 on a weekend box office is still pretty darn good, especially when it's effectively Saturday.
Exactly. And I wanted to add to your list of titles. Has anybody heard of a title called In Our Hands, The Battle for Jerusalem? No, not a single person.
Couple
Two people in
people.
this room. Last night it did 1.6 million on 700 runs for one show. That sort of speaks to, and by the way, I think it was second in the stack, just under Guardians of the Galaxy.
Okay. Alien's going to fall off, I guess, huh? If it was under Guardians of the Galaxy.
I think we're above that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you also talked about, we used esports and a couple other things. What other things do you see coming to the auditorium?
Well, we see Faith having a huge surge right now. Faith, they're a real devoted and loyal audience. The key with Faith is if it gets the check mark basically by the audience, it's through the roof. There's no end to what it could do. If it doesn't, it really just doesn't even appear on the radar. We talked a little bit about esports because of Mediamation getting into the space. It's been more on the cold side than it has been on the hot side for us. We've just seen a resurgence in sports in general with some boxing events that we've done, and I think very soon we're going to announce that we have a partnership with an MMA entity that will really reignite our business in that space.
All right, a couple other, let's take two more questions. Who's got one? Over on this side of the room? Anybody going once? You lady back here in the second to the last row? Yes, you.
This is a question for the panel, but for Ted in particular. So, how long do you think it will take for VR to make a really significant change to film entertainment?
To filmed entertainment.
Yeah, film entertainment as a whole.
Well, I would say in some ways it's already has made that significant change. The fact that you can bring people into a world, and there are now hundreds, if not thousands, of examples from all different parts of the industry that are creating virtual reality experiences in the cinematic vein and more of a passive, let's watch it and experience it. I think probably if you're curious and track the latest piece from Alejandro Chivo that just premiered in Cannes, it's going to have a museum run, and it's about the Mexican immigrant story, is truly a cinematic achievement in virtual reality. My friends at a company called the Virtual Reality Company, which did The Martian with us, helped us do The Martian, they just opened their VR experience. It's like a 14-minute VR experience called Raising a Ruckus, about a dog named Ruckus. It's a kid animation story, and it just opened in the IMAX VR Center, and it is a cinematic journey. It's basically like a theme park ride inside a virtual reality experience. So I would say from a cinematic standpoint, we're well on our way to blending those mediums together, and within the next 3 to 5 years, you're going to see a tremendous impetus to more and more of those things happening.
It depends also on what you mean by cinematic. A lot of the exhibitors want to extend the relationship and that stickiness that we talk about with their patrons. And so having a teaser, having a 12-minute promotion that you can see in VR to tease you on the story, or what Disney would call third screen entertainment, where you've got extra pieces of the story that you can follow later. Both the exhibitors and the studios are looking to extend that relationship with the consumer, and I would consider that coming very quickly in the cinema space for VR.
Yeah, there are companies like Nomadic, which you could track, that are doing things really interesting. There's a whole bunch of different companies that are experimenting with in-lobby. There's a company in Europe called M2 that's doing it, and essentially taking that 2-hour experience and kicking another hour before and after. So if people are going to go out of their homes to experience something, they're going to try and yearn and find something new other than a normal movie theater experience. So we see VR as a front end to going to an escape theme park style cinema experience, and that's a very modern experience. And then eventually that travels into the glasses, and you get to use it.
And that's what Heather was talking about in terms of CinemaCon and what they showed at the Coca-Cola booth.
That's right.
This gentleman back here, go ahead, please.
Just following up on what you're saying there, is VR automatically going to replace a lot of that communal experience that we think of with the cinema, or just expand it in a different way?
Not at all. I talk about this a lot, and I think you can answer the question by, you still probably go to Broadway plays, although you probably don't go to them a lot, right? Because it becomes a little more of an edge case. And that entertainment is still a multi-billion-dollar industry, although it is not nearly as big as the cinema, right? The interactive gaming industry came out of nowhere. It is now bigger than the cinema industry. But the cinema industry has not gone away. It continues to evolve. What we talk about a lot, what Todd and I talk about a lot, is how the importance of really eventizing a cinema, which is what, from Fathom's standpoint, same thing. Their success is creating things that feel like events, that feel like this is an actual valid reason to get out of the house. We have a nice big screen in our house, typically. Most people do, right? And we have lots of ways to access content. What is that stimulation point that says, this is something fun that we want to do to get in the car and get there and go do something? So I don't think, and we could prove this over and over again, to the fact that you likely still read books, right? And some of you probably still read books on paper. they don't actually go away. They just find different veins of success. They tend to become a little less mainstream. There's always a new mainstream form of entertainment that will replace the thing before it, but it typically doesn't mean the death call for something that is before it.
It sounds like only blockbusters. People
Well,
really get out there.
to your
For
point,
now.
not really. I mean, there's lots of choices for people that want to get out and entertain themselves. And film festivals are continuing to see and thrive with unique content. Like, I go to a lot of film festivals every year, and film festivals are profitable, and they bring an audience that is actually looking for fare other than a big Disney blockbuster.
Yeah, the community experience matters.
And with that, we're going to wind up. Join me in thanking the panel for a great job today. And thank you for being here today.